The night was silent in the outer colony. Stars shone like tiny fires across the black sky, and the human settlement slept in peace. Far above, broken ships drifted in the cold dark of space. Most were old wrecks forgotten after battles that ended long ago. But one ship was different. It was alien, its surface sharp and strange like the bones of a dead creature. James, a human engineer, was on late duty at the colony's listening post. His job was simple: scan the radio waves, watch the monitors, and report if anything unusual appeared. Normally it was boring work. Most nights passed with nothing but static and empty signals, but tonight was not normal. James leaned forward when he heard it. At first it was faint, just a soft crackle of sound. He adjusted the controls, tuning the receiver. Then the sound grew clear and his heart stopped. It was a cry. Not the cry of a machine, not static, not alien chatter. It was the cry of a child. He froze, his hands gripping the desk. The voice was weak, trembling, but he could hear the word clearly. Mom, Mom. James pulled off his headset and stared at the dark screen in front of him. That was impossible. The signal was coming from the derelict alien ship that had been floating near the colony for weeks. Everyone believed the ship was empty, just a hollow shell. And yet, he had heard it. He put the headset back on. The cry came again, soft, broken, desperate. Mom! A cold shiver ran down his spine. How could an alien child know this human word? Was it real or some trick? James felt his chest tighten. He had heard many strange things working in deep space, but never something that reached straight into his heart like this. A child's cry was not just sound, it was pain, it was fear, it was hope. He looked at the comms panel. The signal was weak, but it was there. Somewhere inside that alien wreck, someone or something was calling out for help. He should report it. That was the rule. But he knew what would happen if he did. The colony leaders would laugh, call it a ghost signal, or worse, send soldiers to destroy the ship before checking. If there really was a child in there, she would be lost. James stood up. His heart pounded. He couldn't sit here and ignore it. He grabbed his jacket, strapped on his sidearm, and activated his shuttle. The small craft hummed as he guided it up into the black sky. He didn't file a report. He didn't ask for backup. This was something he had to do alone. The alien ship grew larger as he approached. Its surface was scarred with burn marks, broken panels, and strange symbols that seemed to move when he stared too long. His shuttle light swept across the hull, showing cracks and holes. The wreck looked dead, but then through the static the cry came again. Mom! James's throat tightened. That voice was inside. He docked his shuttle to a broken airlock and forced it open. Cold air rushed at him, carrying the smell of rust and something sour. He stepped inside, flashlight in hand. The corridors were silent. Alien markings covered the walls, glowing faintly. The floor was scattered with broken tools and dried stains he did not want to think about. Every step echoed. He moved deeper into the ship, following the faint signal on his wrist scanner. His light flickered across twisted metal, strange pipes, and shattered doors. The place felt wrong, like it had been abandoned in anger. Then he heard it again. Not through his headset, this time with his own ears. Mom. The voice was small, weak, and close. James turned a corner and froze. In the center of the room was a cracked stasis pod. Inside lay a child, small, frail, and not human. Her skin glowed faintly silver in the dark. Her eyes, huge and bright, shimmered with tears. She was shaking, her tiny hands pressed against the glass. James's heart stopped. She looked so helpless. She was not a monster. She was just a child. Mom, she whispered, her voice trembling, her eyes locking onto his. James slowly stepped forward, lowering his weapon. His breath was heavy. He didn't know what she was, why she knew that word, or why she was here. But he knew one thing: she needed help. He reached out, his hand brushing the cold surface of the pod. But then, behind him, echoed the heavy sound of footsteps. Not human footsteps. Alien. The sound grew louder. Closer, scraping metal against the floor. James turned sharply, his light flashing down the corridor. Shadows moved. A deep growl echoed through the ship. He wasn't alone. The sound of alien footsteps echoed through the corridor, heavy and sharp, like metal claws scraping stone. James froze, his heart hammering in his chest. He had no idea how many were coming, or what they would do if they found him. The child inside the cracked pod whimpered. Her glowing eyes widened in fear, and she pressed her tiny hands harder against the glass. Mom, she whispered again, her voice trembling. James clenched his jaw. He could not leave her here, not with those things closing in. Slowly, carefully, he pulled the release lever on the side of the pod. The machine hissed, steam escaping in a sharp burst. The sound echoed down the hall like a gunshot. The footsteps stopped. James cursed under his breath. He worked faster, prying open the pod lid. The alien child coughed weakly as cold air rushed over her. She was small, too small, her thin arms shaking as she reached up toward him. Without thinking, James lifted her out. She was lighter than he expected, her skin cool and smooth, glowing faintly silver under his light. She buried her face in his chest, trembling, whispering that same word. Mom. James swallowed hard. He wasn't her mother. He wasn't even sure what she was. But in that moment, her voice cut through all his doubts. She was alive. She was afraid. And she was looking to him for safety. The footsteps started again, this time louder, closer. James shifted the child in his arms and drew his sidearm with his free hand. He stepped back, pressing himself against the wall, aiming down the corridor. His flashlight beam shook as shadows flickered in the distance. Then he saw them. 3 alien figures stepped into view. They were tall, armored, their skin ridged and dark, their eyes glowing like burning coals. They moved with purpose, scanning the halls, weapons raised. One of them hissed, a sound that rattled in James's chest. He didn't understand the words, but he didn't need to. They were hunting. The child in his arms whimpered again, clutching his jacket tightly. James thought fast. He couldn't fight them, not 3, not here. He needed to escape. He glanced around and spotted a half-collapsed service tunnel to his right. The opening was small, broken, jagged, but just big enough for him to crawl through. Without hesitation, James darted into the tunnel. The metal tore at his jacket as he squeezed inside, holding the child close. She didn't cry out, didn't make a sound, only buried her face against him, trusting him completely. Behind him, the aliens roared. Their heavy footsteps pounded the floor, echoing closer and closer. James crawled faster, his arms burning, his knees scraping against sharp metal. The tunnel twisted and turned, full of broken pipes and fallen panels. His light flickered. Sweat dripped down his face, then silence. He stopped, breathing hard, listening. The aliens were gone, or maybe they were waiting. James pulled himself into a wider chamber at the end of the tunnel. His flashlight revealed rows of empty stasis pods, cracked and broken. This place had been some kind of storage bay. Now it was nothing but dust and ruins. He gently set the child down on a piece of debris. She looked up at him, her glowing eyes wide and wet with tears. For the first time, she spoke more than a single word. They, throw me away. James froze. The words were broken, accented but unmistakable. She could speak his language, at least a little. They, no want me, she whispered. Mistake. Her voice cracked as she hugged her knees to her chest. James's stomach twisted. They had abandoned her, left her to die in this wreck because she was different, because she wasn't what they wanted. He knelt beside her, lowering his weapon. You're not a mistake, he said softly, though he wasn't sure if she understood. The child looked at him, tilting her head slightly. Her small hand reached out, touching his chest. Human, safe? James nodded. Yes, I'll keep you safe. For a moment, the fear in her eyes eased. She leaned against him, her breathing slowing. She was exhausted, but she trusted him. Then the sound returned. A loud crash shook the chamber. The wall behind them groaned, metal bending and tearing. James snapped his head up. A section of the wall collapsed, and the 3 alien soldiers burst through. Their glowing eyes locked on him, weapons raised. The child screamed, clutching James's arm. James lifted his sidearm, firing quick shots. The energy bolts lit up the chamber, sparks flying as they hit metal. One soldier stumbled back, but the others kept coming. He grabbed the child, pulling her close, and ran. The aliens roared, chasing him through the ruins. His heart thundered in his chest, every step echoing through the ship. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to get out. He had to protect her. As he sprinted into another corridor, the child whispered again, her voice filled with fear and hope. Dad? James nearly stumbled. His chest tightened. She didn't just see him as safe. She saw him as family, and that changed everything. James ran through the alien corridors, the child clutched tightly in his arms. Behind him, the sound of alien roars and pounding footsteps shook the ship. The soldiers were relentless. They weren't just hunting him, they were hunting her. The child buried her face in his chest, her small body trembling. Every time she whispered, "Dad," James's heart tightened. He had only found her minutes ago, but already he knew one truth. He could not let them take her. The corridor split into two paths. James skidded to a stop, chest heaving, sweat dripping down his face. Left or right? The scanner on his wrist blinked faintly, pointing toward the left path, closer to his shuttle. But the aliens were gaining fast. He chose left. The hallway was dark, lit only by the weak glow of strange alien symbols carved into the walls. The air was thick with dust and the smell of old metal. James's boots pounded against the floor, echoing like gunfire. Behind him, the aliens hissed. A plasma bolt whizzed past his head, striking the wall with a loud crack. Sparks rained down, lighting the shadows. "Faster," James muttered, pushing his legs harder. The child looked up at him, her glowing eyes full of fear. "They want me," she whispered. "I won't let them have you," James said firmly, even though his breath came in gasps. He had no idea how long he could keep running, but he knew he had to try. The corridor opened into a wide chamber, once a hangar, now broken and hollow. Shattered ships and twisted metal filled the space. The ceiling had collapsed in places, leaving gaps where starlight poured through. James ducked behind a pile of wreckage as the aliens stormed in behind him. He crouched low, holding the child close, listening to their guttural voices echo across the hangar. "They throw me away," the child whispered again, her words heavy with pain. James's chest burned with anger. They hadn't just abandoned her. They were here to finish the job. He couldn't let that happen. One alien soldier stepped closer, scanning the wreckage with glowing eyes. James tightened his grip on his sidearm, waiting. Then, crack! The alien swung its weapon toward the wreckage. James didn't wait. He leapt out, firing 2 quick shots. The bolt struck the alien in the chest, sending it crashing to the ground. The other 2 roared in fury, their weapons flashing. James ducked behind a broken engine, sparks showering around him. The child clung to him, her small fingers digging into his jacket. He needed a way out. His eyes darted around the hangar until he spotted it, a half-broken cargo lift on the far side. If it still worked, it could take them closer to the docking bay where his shuttle was waiting. But the lift was across the open floor. James took a deep breath, then sprinted. Plasma fire sizzled past him, scorching the ground. He weaved between wrecks, dodging blasts, the child's cries echoing in his ears. Finally, he reached the lift. He slammed the button, praying the machine still had power. The gears groaned, lights flickered, and slowly, too slowly, the lift began to descend. The aliens charged, their roars shaking the chamber. Come on," James whispered, gripping his sidearm with one hand while holding the child with the other. He fired back, forcing the aliens to duck for cover. The lift screeched lower, sparks flying from its cables. At the last second, James jumped inside, pulling the child with him. The gate slammed shut and the lift rattled downward. Plasma bolts struck the walls, shaking the chamber, but the lift held. James leaned against the wall, gasping for air. The child sat beside him, eyes wide, her small hands clutching his sleeve. "They will not stop," she whispered. "I know," James said, reloading his weapon. His voice was steady, but inside he felt the weight of her words. The aliens would chase them until they were caught, or until he found a way to escape. The lift screeched to a halt, opening into another corridor. James stepped out carefully, scanning the shadows. For a moment, everything was quiet. Too quiet. The child tugged on his sleeve. "Trap," she whispered. Before James could react, a shadow moved. An alien dropped from the ceiling, landing hard in front of them. Its weapon aimed straight at the child. James didn't think, he moved. He shoved the child behind him and fired point blank. The blast lit the hall, throwing the alien back into the wall. It slid to the floor, lifeless. The child gasped, staring at James with wide eyes. "You saved me," she whispered, almost like she couldn't believe it. James nodded, chest heaving. Always, but he knew it wasn't over. The other soldiers would be close behind. They had only bought themselves a little more time. He adjusted his grip on the child and pushed forward. The docking bay wasn't far. If they could reach the shuttle, maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. As they hurried through the dark corridor, the child whispered something new. Her voice was soft, hopeful, and full of trust. Dad, home? James's throat tightened. He didn't know what home would mean for her, or if they could ever truly find safety. But he answered anyway. Yes, he said. I'll take you home. And with those words, he ran into the shadows, the sound of alien roars rising behind him once more. James raced down the narrow corridor, the alien child clinging to his chest. His boots pounded against the broken floor, echoing like thunder in the hollow ship. Behind them, the aliens roared in fury, their weapons crackling with deadly energy. The docking bay was close. He could almost feel the hum of his shuttle waiting, hidden in the wreck's shadow. If they could reach it, they had a chance. If not, James pushed the thought away. He couldn't fail, not now, not with her. The corridor twisted, ending in a heavy blast door. His heart sank, locked. He set the child down gently, her glowing eyes watching him with fear. Stay behind me, he whispered. The alien's footsteps grew louder. They were coming fast. James pulled out his hacking tool, his fingers shaking as he forced it into the panel. Sparks flew, wires hissed. Come on, come on. The child tugged on his sleeve. Here. The door finally hissed open with a groan. James scooped her back into his arms and ran through. The docking bay stretched wide before him, a graveyard of broken alien craft. And there, at the far edge, sat his shuttle, small but strong, waiting like a lifeline. But between him and safety stood two more alien soldiers. Their glowing eyes fixed on him instantly. James didn't stop. He raised his sidearm and fired. Bolts of energy lit the bay, forcing one alien back. The other charged forward with a roar, its claws raised. James ducked, rolled, and fired again. The shot struck the alien's leg, sending it crashing to the ground. He didn't wait to finish it. He ran, faster than ever, the child clutching his neck tightly. The shuttle's hatch opened as he neared, its lights blinking in welcome. James leapt inside, slamming the controls. The hatch sealed shut just as plasma fire struck the outer hull, rocking the craft. The child gasped, holding onto his arm. James strapped her into the co-pilot's seat. Hold on, he said. The engines roared to life, shaking the entire bay. With a burst of fire, the shuttle lifted, smashing through falling debris. The aliens shouted, firing wildly, but James didn't stop. He pushed the throttle forward, and the shuttle blasted out of the wreck and into the cold dark of space. For a moment, silence. The stars stretched wide and endless, the colony planet glowing faintly in the distance. The child looked out the window, her eyes wide with wonder. She whispered softly, beautiful. James allowed himself one deep breath. They had escaped for now, but his relief didn't last. Alarms blared across the shuttle. The radar lit up with red markers, alien warships, 3 of them. They had followed. James cursed under his breath, tightening his grip on the controls. His shuttle was fast, but not built for long fights. If they caught him, it was over. The child looked at him, fear in her glowing eyes. They chase us. Yes, James said, his voice firm. But I won't let them catch us. He dove the shuttle into a field of broken asteroids weaving between spinning rocks and shattered ice. Plasma bolts streaked past, some striking nearby stones and exploding into fire. The shuttle shook with every near miss. James's hands moved fast, guiding the craft through tight gaps. Sweat dripped down his face, but he kept his focus sharp. The child clung to her seat, her voice trembling. You saved me. Always, her words fueled him. He grit his teeth and pushed the engines harder. The shuttle roared, skimming dangerously close to asteroid walls. One alien warship tried to follow directly behind, but it clipped a rock, spinning out of control before bursting into flames. The child gasped in awe. You strong, Dad? James didn't answer. His eyes stayed locked on the controls. 2 more warships remained, and they were closing in. He scanned the radar and spotted a narrow gap in the asteroid field. A shortcut, but extremely dangerous. If he made it through, he could lose them. If he failed, they'd be crushed. He glanced at the child. She was watching him, her trust clear in her glowing eyes. James nodded. Hold on tight. He slammed the throttle forward. The shuttle screamed as it shot into the gap. Jagged rocks spun past, scraping the hull. The child held her breath, clutching her seat with tiny hands. The alien ships tried to follow, but the passage was too narrow. One struck the walls, shattering into debris. The other slowed, unable to keep up. James burst out of the asteroid field into open space. The radar blinked, the last warship had vanished. They were alone. The child cheered softly, her eyes glowing brighter. She looked at him with a smile that made his chest ache. "Dad, we safe?" James allowed himself a small smile. For now. He set the shuttle's course toward Earth. The blue planet appeared on the horizon, shining like hope itself. The child leaned back in her seat, still smiling. But her voice was soft when she spoke next. Come again. No, stop, dangerous." James shook his head. "You're not dangerous. You're a child. And you're mine now." Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not just from fear. They were from something else, hope. She whispered one word, the only word she seemed to know with her whole heart. Home. James's chest tightened. He looked out at Earth, its oceans and continents glowing in the starlight. "Yes," he said, "I'm taking you home." But even as he spoke, he knew this was only the beginning. The aliens would not give up. They would come again. And when they did, the whole world would learn the truth. That a child they had tried to throw away was now under human protection. The shuttle pierced through Earth's atmosphere, fire streaking across its hull. James gripped the controls, teeth clenched as the craft shook violently. The alien child sat beside him, her glowing eyes wide with awe and fear. Then with a loud boom, the shuttle broke free. Clouds parted, and the blue world stretched out below. Oceans glittering, forests endless, cities glowing like jewels in the night. The child pressed her small hands against the window. "Beautiful," she whispered. James glanced at her. In that moment, he saw not an alien, not a mistake, but a child discovering wonder for the first time. His chest tightened. He didn't know why, but protecting her already felt like his purpose. The shuttle landed on a hidden pad deep inside the colony outpost. James quickly powered it down. He knew the aliens would not stop. They would follow. But for now, Earth meant safety. He carried the child through the quiet corridors of his shelter. It was simple, just a few rooms, tools scattered everywhere, and a small living space. To him, it had always been just a place to work and sleep. But when he set her down on the couch, the room felt different, warmer, like a home. The child looked around curiously, touching the soft fabric, staring at the blinking lights. Then she pointed at a photo on the wall, an old picture of James's mother long gone. "Mom?" she asked softly. James's throat tightened. "No, not anymore," he said quietly. The child tilted her head, confused. Then she crawled closer and placed her hand on his chest. "Dad," she whispered. The word struck him harder than any bullet. He should have corrected her, should have explained. But he didn't, because deep down he wanted it to be true. For the first time in years, James smiled. "Yeah," he said softly. "Dad." Days passed. James taught the child small things. How to hold a spoon, how to draw shapes on a pad, how to say new words. She learned quickly, repeating his voice with surprising accuracy. But no word meant more to her than Dad. Sometimes she would sit on his lap, pointing at pictures in his old books. Sometimes she would laugh when he made faces, her voice ringing with a sound he had never thought he'd hear in his home. Joy. At night, though she often cried in her sleep, whispering "Mom" into the dark, each time James sat by her side, holding her hand until the tremors stopped. He didn't know if she remembered someone else or if she just longed for something she never truly had. Either way, he stayed. But safety never lasted long. News began spreading across the colony. Strange signals had been detected in orbit. Rumors whispered of alien spies, of hidden threats. Some claimed an alien child had been seen. James knew what it meant. Someone had betrayed them. The aliens were looking, and Earth's leaders were starting to notice. One evening, as James was fixing a generator, the child sat nearby, humming a tune she had learned from him. Suddenly, the colony broadcast crackled to life. "This is a warning," a stern voice declared. "Aliens demand that we return what was taken from their ship. They call it a dangerous creation." James froze. His heart dropped. They were talking about her. The child looked up at him, her glowing eyes full of fear. "They want me?" James knelt beside her, gripping her small hands. "No, you're not theirs anymore. You're mine." Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded slowly. She trusted him, even when the whole world seemed to turn against her. That night, James stood on the balcony, staring up at the stars. He could already see faint lights moving in the sky, alien ships. They were coming. The child joined him, holding a small blanket around her shoulders. She stood close, staring up at the same stars. "Dad?" she whispered. "Yes?" "Home? Safe?" James wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. He didn't know the answer, but he couldn't let her see his doubt. "Yes," he said firmly. "As long as I'm here, you're safe." She leaned against him, her tiny body warm against the cold night air. For a moment, James let himself believe it. But deep inside, he knew the truth. The war was coming closer, and soon the whole planet would have to decide whether to protect her or destroy her. The night sky above Earth burned with strange lights. At first, people thought they were falling stars. But James knew better. He stood outside his shelter, staring upward as alien warships drifted into orbit. Their shadows stretched across the atmosphere, silent and heavy like storm clouds before a flood. Inside the house, the child pressed her glowing face against the window. Her small voice trembled. "They come?" James nodded grimly. "Yes, and they won't stop until they get you." The child turned toward him, tears in her eyes. "They say I dangerous." "You're not dangerous," James said firmly, kneeling beside her. "You're alive. You're special. And that's why they're afraid." The colony broadcast crackled again across every speaker in the city. This time the voice was not human, it was alien, deep, guttural, filled with rage. "Return the child," the voice boomed. "She is a weapon that must not live. Refuse and Earth will burn." The child flinched, covering her ears. James's fist clenched. His stomach twisted with anger. They had abandoned her, called her a mistake, and now they wanted her destroyed. He stood quickly, his boots thudding against the floor. "I won't let them touch you," he said, his voice low but sharp. But outside, Earth's leaders were already meeting in secret halls. Some wanted peace at any cost. Others feared the aliens' power. Whispers spread like fire. Maybe the child was dangerous. Maybe handing her over was the only way to save the planet. That night, James brought the child deeper into the colony's hidden tunnels. His old friend Mara met him there. She was a soldier once, her face marked with scars, her eyes sharp. "You're in trouble, James," she said. "The council is debating. If they vote, they'll hand her over." James's jaw tightened. "They'll be signing her death sentence." Mara crossed her arms. "And maybe saving billions of lives." "Don't you see?" "The aliens won't stop. She's just a child," James snapped. "She laughs, she cries, she learns, and like us. They call her a weapon because they're afraid of what she could become." Mara studied him for a long moment, then glanced at the child. The little one clung to James's sleeve, her glowing eyes wide and wet. Mara sighed, her voice softening. "She doesn't look like a weapon," she admitted. "She looks like a daughter." The child whispered, her voice shaky but clear. "Dad, safe?" James knelt and hugged her tight. "I'll keep you safe, no matter what." But as he said it, the ground trembled. Dust rained from the ceiling. The alien warships had begun their attack. The colony erupted in chaos. Alarms screamed across the streets. Families rushed into shelters. Soldiers filled the walls and defense cannons roared into the night. Bright beams of alien fire cut across the sky, striking towers and shaking the earth. James grabbed the child and ran through the tunnels with Mara at his side. Explosions echoed above, sending tremors through the ground. "Where are we going?" Mara shouted. "My shuttle," James said. "If Earth won't protect her, then I will." The child clung to him, whispering over and over, "They come. They come." James's heart pounded. He could feel her fear, raw and deep. But beneath it, there was something else, something strange. Her eyes glowed brighter than before, almost pulsing with light. "Mara," James said quietly as they ran. "What if the aliens are afraid of her for a reason?" Mara shot him a look. "What do you mean?" "She's not dangerous to us," James said. "But maybe to them." The child suddenly cried out, a piercing sound that echoed through the tunnels. James stopped, clutching her close. The ground shook violently, and far above, one of the alien warships faltered in the sky. Mara's eyes widened. What was that? James didn't answer. He only held the child tighter, his mind racing. They burst out of the tunnels near the colony's edge. The sky was a battlefield now, Earth's ships clashing with alien warships, fire lighting the heavens. James rushed toward the shuttle pad, but soldiers blocked the way. Earth soldiers, their weapons pointed at him. "Stand down, James," their leader barked. "Hand over the child." "The council has decided." James's blood ran cold. He stepped back, shielding the child with his body. "If you give her up, You're no better than them. The soldiers didn't move. Their weapons glowed, ready to fire. The child pressed her face into James's chest, whispering softly, "Dad, don't leave me." James raised his weapon with shaking hands. He couldn't fight them all, but he wouldn't surrender either. His voice was firm, unyielding. "You'll have to kill me first." The soldiers hesitated. The ground shook again as another alien blast struck the city. Smoke filled the air. Above them, the alien warships drew closer, their voices booming across the sky. The child must be destroyed, or Earth dies. James stood tall, holding the trembling child, his heart pounding. He was one man against two armies, his own and theirs, but he knew one truth. He would not let her go. The city burned beneath the alien sky. Towers crumbled, fire rained down, and people screamed as war filled the air. Alien warships hovered above like black shadows, their weapons glowing with deadly light. James stood at the edge of the shuttle pad, the child clutched tightly in his arms. Earth soldiers surrounded him, weapons raised, and above them the alien voice thundered across the sky. "Return the child, or your world dies." The soldiers shifted uneasily, torn between orders and fear. The council had spoken, "Give up the child." But none of them looked ready to take her from James's arms. The little one pressed her face against his chest, her small body trembling. "Dad, they hurt me," she whispered, her voice breaking. James's grip tightened. His heart was a storm of anger and fear. He couldn't fight everyone. He couldn't win this war alone. But he knew one thing: he would never give her up. He raised his weapon, his voice raw with defiance. "You'll have to kill me first." The soldiers froze. Their leader's hands shook on his rifle. For a moment, no one moved. Then above them, the alien warships began to descend. Their weapons charged, a low hum filling the air. The end was coming. The child lifted her head. Her glowing eyes widened, shimmering with tears. But this time she did not hide. She stood tall in James' arms, looking at the sky. "Stop," she whispered. And the warships trembled. James gasped as a pulse of light rippled from her small body, spreading across the battlefield. The alien ships shuddered, their weapons flickering. Soldiers on the ground stumbled, clutching their helmets as static filled the air. The child's voice grew louder, carrying through the chaos. "Stop, please." "Mom!" The word echoed like a bell, not just sound but power, a signal older than any war. The alien warships froze. For a moment, the entire sky went silent. Then a deep voice answered, not with rage, but with something James had never heard in them before: fear. "She awakens," the voice said. The soldiers on the ground lowered their weapons in shock. Even Mara, standing nearby, stared with wide eyes. The child raised her hands, glowing brighter than ever. Her small voice shook, but it was strong. "No fight, no hurt, no more." The warships trembled again, and one by one their weapons powered down. The light faded from their cannons. The sky grew still. James held her close, his chest tight with awe. She wasn't a weapon. She wasn't a mistake. She was something greater, something that could end war with a single cry. The alien's voice returned, low and shaken. "She is not ours. Not anymore." And with that, the warships turned, pulling back into the stars. Their shadows vanished, leaving Earth's sky clear once more. The soldiers on the ground lowered their rifles completely. Some dropped them. No one spoke. James looked at the child in his arms. Her glow dimmed slowly, her body trembling from exhaustion. She leaned against him, her voice soft. "Dad, safe now?" James nodded, his voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, you're safe. You saved us all." She smiled weakly, her small hand touching his face. "Home?" He hugged her tight, tears burning in his eyes. "Yes, you're home." Days later, the colony streets were quiet again. The fires had been put out, the skies cleared. Earth's leaders argued, but their voices no longer carried the same weight. People had seen the truth with their own eyes. The child was not a weapon. She was hope. James walked through the streets with her hand in his. Everywhere they went, people stopped to look, not with fear, but with wonder. Some even bowed their heads. Mara approached, her arms crossed but her eyes softer than before. "Looks like you were right," she said. James smiled faintly. For once, Mara crouched to look at the child. "You saved us," she said. "Never forget that." The child tilted her head, then reached out and touched Mara's scarred hand. "Family?" she whispered. Mara blinked, then gave a small smile. That night, James sat on the balcony with the child curled against him. The stars glittered above, endless and bright. "Do you miss them?" he asked gently. The child shook her head. "They throw me away, but you keep me." She looked up at him, eyes glowing softly. "You, my dad." James swallowed hard, pulling her close. "And you're my daughter." They sat in silence for a long time, listening to the quiet night. For the first time in years, James felt peace. And for the first time in her life, the child knew what it meant to be loved. Together, they looked at the stars, not as a threat, but as a promise. Because from now on, they would face whatever came next, not as soldier and alien, but as father and daughter.